This week on Inside Olympia, how is Washington state government guarding digital privacy and adjusting to this age of AI? What are the biggest threats to cybersecurity? And how can technology make government work better? On the program, State Chief Technology Officer Gretchen Peri and Chief Privacy Officer Katy Ruckle.
From the TVW studio, it's Inside Olympia with host Austin Jenkins.
Welcome to Inside Olympia. Technology changes fast. State government does not. So how does a state that's still using a computer programming language from the 1950s have any hope of entering the AI age? What are ways technology can help deliver government services more efficiently and effectively? And what are the barriers to their deployment? How is the state protecting people's data privacy? This hour, we'll put those questions and much more to two guests, the state's Chief Technology Officer, Gretchen Peri, and Chief Privacy Officer, Katy Ruckle. Welcome both of you to Inside Olympia. Good to see you. Congratulations, Gretchen, because you're brand new to this role, which we will address in some background in both of our guests. First off, Gretchen Peri was appointed to her position just a couple of months ago, in September of this year. Previously, she advised state and local governments on technology adoption in her role as Managing Director for Public and Social Impact at Slalom Consulting. Among her mandates as Chief Technology Officer is to implement a new strategic plan that includes developing standards for the deployment of AI. Katy Ruckle has served as the state's Chief Privacy Officer since 2020. Previously, she was Privacy Chief at the Department of Social and Health Services. In her role, Ruckle leads statewide privacy policy, training, and incident response. So, there's a lot to talk about, and the timing is obviously good because we are sort of in this AI era. There's a lot of people thinking about how AI is going to change our lives, and already is. But let's just start kind of at the 30,000-foot level. And Gretchen, I want to begin with you because you're brand new to this job, and kind of ask the obvious question. If you were working in a consulting role, you were advising governments, why did you decide to come over to the state, and what was the appeal of this position? Because frankly, consulting and then letting it be their problem seems like a much more fun job.
It's a great question, Austin. After spending the last 20 years advising state and local governments, I've learned kind of the ingredients to success on a lot of these projects, right? And I wanted to be able to bring my time, attention, and energy to a single client, a single customer, and really dedicate myself so I could have an outsized impact. As I was leading our global government education nonprofit business, I found myself on the road a lot and spending time with a variety of different clients across all three sectors. And I wanted at this point in my career to really focus on the state of Washington, where I'm raising my family, where I love this state, and have a large impact here with WATEC as a team. This is a really exciting time for WATEC as we achieve our vision of becoming a top-notch service provider to the state agencies, and I'm really excited to be a part of that.
And you mentioned WATEC, and we should probably make that clear. That is the agency for which you both work. How should we be thinking about what WATEC is?
Yeah, WATEC is a service provider as well as an infrastructure, platform, and software as a service enabler to the agencies. So Katy will talk about how we set standards and guidelines and policies around these various technologies. We also provide a lot of the backbone infrastructure to the state, and we manage some of the applications on behalf of the state. And then the future, which I'd love to talk a little bit later about, is how do we make a marketplace where our customer agencies can come to WATEC to buy the solutions that are going to meet their business needs from us, and we can enable those services and solutions to our customer agencies.
Okay, I think that's a great kind of beginning to get us grounded for your role as Chief Technology Officer in WATEC. Katy, let me come over to you and ask about the piece that you own, which is this privacy piece. You're now kind of the veteran, having been in this role for 5 years. As we speak now in 2025, and you've been on the program before, how are you thinking about privacy, especially in this AI kind of realm, and especially after 5 years in this role?
Yes, so I started January 1st, 2020, which is kind of an auspicious time, as we might remember in the state. And at the time, we were having conversations at a statewide level on the Washington Privacy Act, which didn't actually pass in Washington. But
And we should just note that that was essentially a proposal to create a statewide law to establish privacy protections for consumers.
it was, for consumer
for
focused.
and
Yes.
something that I think up to 19 states now have, but not Washington, even though the model for most of the other state laws emanated from Washington. There's sort of an
Yes,
irony
so
there.
we were lucky early on to have a focus on privacy at the enterprise level with the statewide, with the lawmakers and then the governor's office. And as in this role, I've been able to build up the privacy maturity across the state agencies. We just went through an audit with JLARC, the Joint Legislative Audit Review Committee, and we'll be going over some of those findings actually at a hearing in December. But as a part of that review, they found that we were meeting what we were statutorily created to do, which was to be a resource for state agencies and really help agencies build their own privacy programs to think about how they're collecting, sharing, using the information that they collect from the public.
Just one point of clarification. We hear a lot about governments in the context of cybersecurity and protecting data. Help us kind of unscramble like the privacy piece.
Right. So privacy and security do work hand in hand, but the security is more of the how we're protecting the data, and the privacy side is really thinking about the what. What data are we collecting and for what reasons?
Do we need it in the
Yes.
first place? And then once we have it, how do we manage it?
Right.
How long do we keep it?
Right. And so we have really ingrained the privacy principles for the state agencies, which includes lawful, fair, and responsible use, data minimization, only collect and use what you need, purpose limitation. Security is one of those principles, of course, and also due diligence and who we're sharing our information with, and transparency and accountability, which gets to our privacy notices. So we have really worked or I have worked, and I'm lucky to have a team now to help agencies get all of those pieces in place to be able to responsibly handle the information, which leads into some of the new concerns or interest of artificial intelligence.
Which we will get back to. Okay, so then I also just want to ask again as sort of a table set question. What are one or two or three big issues on your plate as we speak today? And I'll start with you, Gretchen, and again, I realize you're new to the job. I was struck by the idea that this implementation of a new strategic plan is sort of front and center, but you know, what, if you had to distill it down to a couple of key mandates at this point, what are they?
Yeah. Modernizing our legacy systems and a strategy and approach for us to do that. An AI strategy is my second priority, and we're putting that together right now, a strategy that all of our state agencies see themselves in, and it's really about advancing and scaling the mission of all of our customers and scaling our overall ability to service our customers anywhere in the state. And then, as I was talking about the concept of a marketplace, our enterprise cloud computing program. So building the ability for our customer agencies, all 140 agencies that we support, to be able to purchase their technology and tools through WATEC.
As opposed to going out on their own?
Exactly, yes. Today, our customer agencies have various contracts with the same partners, the same hyperscalers that we have contracts with. So right now, we're going through a process of negotiating on behalf of the entire state with our major partners so that we can offer those pricing, protections, all of the benefits to our customer agencies.
Are you going to have to drag these agencies kicking and screaming to come through the WATEC portal?
I hope not. We're trying to make it as attractive as possible to them.
So they can't resist. Okay.
Right. We want to provide value.
Katy Ruckle, now that, you know, as you've just established, sort of the fundamentals are in place for a privacy program in this state, where do you go from here?
So for our priorities right now, one of my main initiatives that I'm working on actually with Gretchen is adoption of the AI policy. So we've worked very hard over the past year to create a policy, done a lot of stakeholder work with the state agencies, and they're going through a governance process. And so we're hoping to have an enterprise AI policy adopted, which really gets to a responsible AI framework that I think overlaps with the privacy policy that we have as well very, very neatly.
And to be clear, we're talking about how state agencies could start to use and deploy AI.
Yes.
And what the rules of the road would be for that.
Yes. And so part of WATEC, which is Washington Technology Solutions, we're the central IT agency for the state. And so we have, as a part of our scope of authority, to do enterprise IT policy for the state. And so as a part of that, that's what this is. So this sets the floor for responsible AI use for agencies.
Let's also not forget the audience. So why don't you answer this question for sort of two potential audiences? Why should policymakers, let's say legislators who might be watching or listening, care about what WATEC does and what the Chief Technology and Chief Privacy Officer do? And then why should the general public care? Because this starts to feel pretty wonky and pretty technical pretty quickly. What would
You want me to? Yeah. So I think for our lawmakers, we want to demonstrate that we are adopting policies in the state that maybe they don't need to legislate, and they can work with us on and understand how we're implementing responsible policies, and if there's anything that they have interest in supplementing or conversations that we want to have about the state's use of these technologies, because they do have a lot of questions about how we're using those the AI in particular, but all technology and investment, it is expensive to buy technology, and so that's where we're trying to leverage benefits with the contracts that Gretchen was just referencing. But I think for the general public, part of what we're trying to do is really enhance public trust, right? So that's how we're collecting and using the public's data is really foundational for how we think about privacy and privacy principles and our AI principles and responsible AI.
I mean, I can almost answer the question for you, and as much as I can imagine, there's also opportunities here to make government work better and hopefully to start to save some money, because we do have a history of technology-related projects taking longer than they're supposed to take, costing more than we thought they were going to. But I'll let you answer the question.
Well, especially for the public, we want them to know that this is an exercise in efficiency and effectiveness, right? And that's the balance that we constantly look to strike for our public. I think AI is especially exciting because now we have the opportunity to deliver the information that our citizens and residents need in the way they want to receive it, in the language they want to receive it. So we have a lot of work to do to make that digital transformation a reality, but the tools and technologies and the channels are there for us to make that vision truly come true for our residents.
Let's dive in on AI, because I have a personal interest in this. I cover this as a beat on a day-to-day basis, and I'm really interested in how states are thinking about the opportunities here. And just for some context, and I'll start with you, Katy, under former Governor Inslee, there was an executive order on AI. There is also, I believe it was enacting legislation to create an AI task force that is currently meeting, which is thinking not just about state government use, but about AI, kind of what guardrails are needed for consumers as well. And then there's this AI policy for agencies that's being stood up. So pull those pieces together and kind of paint a portrait of where we're at this point.
So the Governor Inslee's Executive Order 2401 put in place instructions for us to do 10 different deliverables. So it was a lot of body of work across many state agencies, and all of those guidelines and resources and responsible use and accountability framework are all available now.
That work got completed.
Yes, online. And it was really instructive, I think, for the state agencies and how we're thinking about setting the floor for the foundation for responsible use and adoption, which then led to the AI risk process that we're building into part of our AI policy as well. And so that is one piece of it. And then you mentioned the AI task force. I actually am appointed as an AI task force member representing WATEC. And that is a body of work of recommendations that, as you mentioned, includes industry partners as well, and labor partners and other advocacy, education. And we're coming together and creating recommendations based on our subcommittees, which includes things like healthcare, consumer privacy pieces, transportation, I think environment is one, and all of these different sort of areas to focus recommendations on.
I know you're looking at children's safety as well. It's one of the more recent issues.
That's right.
Okay, so what is we'll sort of stick with AI capabilities in the context of state government. I just interviewed the authors of the book, The AI Con, who are very skeptical. And in fact, think they say artificial intelligence is a marketing term, that this is a lot of hype, that somebody will sell you an AI solution for everything, and you should reject 95 or 99% of those opportunities. So, Gretchen, how are you kind of approaching this as you think about AI's future in state government?
I think there's some truth to that there's a hype cycle. We've seen it with several emerging technologies now, right? Several years ago, it was blockchain was going to be used for everything. Now, we're actually finding useful purposes for blockchain in state and local government. But we needed to really understand, where does it make sense to use that technology for this business need, right? In AI, we're seeing extremely interesting use cases, really around 4 major categories right now. So productivity, as you can imagine. Enterprise knowledge base, how do we surface more of our frequently asked questions and content, right, that we have behind the scenes. Computer vision, which we've been using for a long time now, but really exciting ways recently to analyze images and videos for us to unlock more insights that we've never even been able to.
Can you just give an example of where computer vision might apply in the state government?
Oh, great. So Department of Fish and Wildlife is using ROVs, the remotely operated vehicles underwater, to take video and still images and of like eelgrass, monitoring eelgrass, identifying rockfish. There are a variety of species. Some of them are endangered. And they found that to analyze 1 hour of video images, it would take people 16 hours. Right? So for us,
they're really kind of going frame by frame.
They're going frame by frame to identify, is this a rockfish, blah, blah, blah. And so now we can leverage artificial intelligence, computer intelligence, to do that in a matter of minutes, right? And the scale on which we can do it is a lot broader.
Can you remember the fourth example?
Yes, thank you. Yes, translational AI, conversational AI. So everything you can think about with translation services, language services, both interpretation and translation. It's really exciting, and really exciting for the state right now, especially since we have unique populations and communities in our state.
And they need to translate things into multiple languages,
exactly.
As we see, like with the elections, for instance. I think 17 or 18 ballots
exactly
or
right.
communications, so that people can vote and understand in their own language. So Katy, what are the privacy implications here? And I'll kind of do a double-barreled question, which is always dangerous. What are we already seeing state agencies do, not do? What's been authorized? What unauthorized kinds of uses? I mean, everybody's kind of wanting to try out these tools. I know there's some rules of the road, but with your privacy hat on, how are you thinking about this?
Right. Well, I can say that for the AI uses that Gretchen was mentioning around environmental uses, I love that as a privacy officer because there's no personal information.
The rockfish just doesn't care.
No, there is not a privacy right that the rockfish have or the eelgrass.
Yeah.
Where we're able to really leverage some of the exciting efficiencies that come from those types of technologies were the most experimental, I think, are on the environmental side. On the other side of the fence, where the privacy pieces come in, this is where we're being much more intentional about what data can be used, how data can be leveraged, what needs to be in our contracts to protect that data. whether it's appropriate use at all, and those types of considerations. So that really brings in some of the principles I was talking about in terms of purpose limitation, because that is a risk with AI, is that you're repurposing the data for reasons that you hadn't intended to use it or weren't transparent with individuals about how you were planning to use their
Let
data.
me do the same thing I did with Greg. Like, can you give us an example? Is this like if you were trying to create a chat bot and train it on information the state is holding, you got to think about what information gets into the training module? Or?
Yes, so that would be a good example that we are looking at, and a few agencies have tried. We're working on having chatbots. The accuracy piece, I think, is a challenge as well for making sure, based on these large language models, because we know that it sometimes makes up information that even sounds plausible. And so those are some concerns. That's not necessarily a privacy issue, but that's a data quality accuracy issue, which is very important for government to make sure they're getting information accurately out to the public. But we're all, as a part of that as well, we want to be informing the public about how to use these types of chatbot, maybe not putting personal information in order to get answers out, and thinking about how they're sharing their own information.
What about examples where state government is, with authorization, experimenting with AI now? And for instance, Pennsylvania, I think, partnered with OpenAI, and there was a lot of sort of very kind of lean-in efforts to say, can we save time and help state employees be more efficient, and we're going to model and pilot this. So there's sort of those kinds of examples. And then where are you seeing perhaps unauthorized use?
Well, so the focus for pilots for state employees, we are doing a similar exercise that you mentioned, Pennsylvania, where we have licenses available to state employees to be able to use an authorized ChatGPT account. But for using those, we are also saying you need to restrict that to lower level classification of data. So we have 4 categories of data in the state, so we're saying only category 1 and category 2 data that can be used with those. So,
and again, just can you give us, what would be an example of?
Yes, sorry.
That's
So category 1 is public information that you would put on your website. Category 2 is anything that's publicly disclosable. So, and then the dividing line then is confidential information, and then confidential information with special handling. So our most restrictive data, like HIPAA and CJIS and those types of things. So we're trying to work with the staff to, with the end user training, I guess you would call it, in terms of what types of data can be used appropriately with these chatbot features, or OpenAI and Copilot is another example where we're experimenting and giving pilots to state agencies, staff to test the use of AI.
Are you having to slap some hands for people who just can't resist using ChatGPT to write their press release or their memo to their boss?
So I am not enforcing any of those uses, but we are finding that sometimes people have uploaded information they're not supposed to. And so we do have security protocols in place that flag that for us, and then we revisit some user training.
Okay. So, Gretchen, we had the Commerce Director on recently, Joe Wynn, talked about how, I mean, he's a former Microsoft guy, he's super into this, and he's charging ahead. His idea is that, like, you've got all of these internal regulations that the employees need to know. Could you make a chat bot that makes that easily searchable for them? And, I could imagine right now it's open enrollment, for instance, and you have people calling in to this health benefit exchange, which is, I think, technically a standalone nonprofit. But, asking a bunch of questions, wouldn't it be nice if the people on the other end of the line can look this stuff up? And then externally, if you go to a state agency site and you want help, could a chatbot make this information more accessible? So what is your thinking about, like, the timelines, how we do the internal and external stuff carefully and roll that out?
It's a great question. We're already serving chatbots up to the public. Our Department of Licensing has a chatbot on their website where you can ask a variety of questions, and that's going into the background into our enterprise knowledge base and serving that up for our customers, so that our customer service reps don't have to answer every single one of those calls if we can answer the question electronically. In terms of the employees, I think this is a really interesting conversation because AI is a slightly different technology than we've seen before, right? It used to be that you would build elegant, user-friendly, intuitive software and train and serve it up. But this is all about making people knowledgeable about how they're using AI, how to interpret the outputs, what they need to be critically thinking about. So in my mind, it's more enabling them in more of the process, quite frankly, which is a bigger lift for an agency like WATEC to empower employees with this technology.
There's already examples of this in use. What is the 5-year horizon?
The 5-year horizon for me is right now with AI strategy, identifying the value that the state wants to extract through AI. The value we want to deliver is probably a better word. And then working back from those things to make sure we're not throwing AI at AI. It's really about what do we want to do with these tools? Do we want to reduce recidivism? Okay, then let's work back from recidivism and figure out what are the data elements that we need to be tracking, what are the metrics that we know actually move the lever on those things, and then leveraging AI to make things more timely, more accessible, more fair, more effective. So all of the kind of inputs in the process work that we're doing, we can make more efficient, ultimately to make the process more effective to achieve the outcome we want. So I see us working backwards from the value we wish to deliver through these AI tools. Then we'll get it right.
Are we headed, remind me of the number of agencies we have? One of you just
140.
So are we headed towards a scenario where 140 state agencies are going to be using AI in some way, shape, form, or fashion?
I believe so, yes. I believe, and what we're doing from WATEC is leveraging our enterprise architect team to identify those solution patterns so that then we can build advice, counsel, guidance, how-tos, training around those solution patterns to better enable success with our agencies.
A couple more questions along these lines before we go to break, or maybe one more. Do we have there's been a lot of work done to this point, but is it your sense that we have the laws, the tools, and what you might call the digital plumbing in place to start to maybe experiment more earnestly or robustly with AI in the enterprise of state government?
So for laws, in terms of what the state agencies need, I don't know if we need any laws. That's where we're trying to implement the new policy, right, to set the rules of the road. And so we're hoping that the policy outlines all of the expectations, and I think you mentioned earlier how agencies were deciding risk level and those types of things. And so we are asking agencies to think about the low, moderate, and high risk use cases and identifying those, and then where it's appropriate, investing in, I think as Gretchen was talking about, use cases where we can get more bang for the buck type of a thing, where it's a low risk and a high reward use case, and thinking about those types of things. And that's what the policy helps to outline and help agencies evaluate.
And how much, just because we are in tight budget times, how much is the state budget a barrier to deployment?
I don't believe the state budget is a major barrier to us piloting these things, and then putting them into production may be one thing if we don't have those tools already in our environment. The state budget, I think, is going to hinder us more in terms of large system modernization, quite frankly. But we also are working on that, where we can provide platforms, which in some cases may make sense for agencies to leverage platforms with specific types of data models rather than purchasing a full-blown point solution via RFP.
Got it. We are going to take a brief break. When we return, we continue our conversation with Washington's Chief Technology Officer and Chief Privacy Officer, back after this.
Stolen vehicles are a problem. We need a solution. Pursuits are not the solution to that.
Washington State is not missing high-speed police pursuits. Washington State is missing the possibility of a high-speed pursuit.
Driver fled.
Welcome back to Inside Olympia. Joining me once again is Gretchen Peri, Washington's Chief Technology Officer, newly appointed, I should mention, and Katy Ruckle, the state's Chief Privacy Officer. I want to close out the conversation about AI just by asking about this AI task force. I understand it's going to be reporting to the legislature by the end of the year, some recommendations. Can you sort of telegraph or preview what might be landing in the legislature's lap in terms of recommendations?
Sure. So we voted as a task force on several different recommendations around education, healthcare, prior authorization, and adopting principles, AI principles that are essentially from the National Institute of Standards and Technology AI Risk Management Framework. And so we did get enough consensus with the AI task force members on several of those recommendations, also including transparency. Representative Shavers has a couple bills that the task force is recommending consideration for the legislature as well, which will be in the upcoming report. I should mention that the task force is 3 years. So we had one report already. We
This
have
is
an
year 2.
interim report, yes. And then we'll have year 3. And we have just started having conversations about potential recommendations on AI chatbots and minors and those types of risks, but that won't be until the future.
How do you define transparency, and how might that show up in legislation?
So the way we're talking about transparency is transparency of the companies that are processing the data and collecting the data and those types of the model transparency and what kind of data it's being trained on and those types of transparency
That shouldn't be a black box.
No, yes. The way we sort of
it.
talk about it is the nutrition label, not necessarily the secret sauce.
What about knowing if you're interacting with AI? That kind of transparency.
Right. So that would be something that we would recommend. If most entities are making that aware, making individuals aware they're interacting with a chatbot, but that even comes along with some of the new legislation we're seeing on AI chatbots, which is periodic reminders to users that they're not interacting with a human.
So there is some interest in that kind of requirement?
Those are some of the conversations we're having around chatbot recommendations, especially for minors.
And just one follow-up, just for national context. We have seen New York and California pass laws in the last year around frontier models, or what have been described as sort of like super powerful models of the future that could be in the wrong hands, misused, and cause like mass casualty events. I mean, it sounds very sci-fi-ish, but there's some concern about this. And then we've also seen states like Colorado pass laws around automated decision-making and ensuring that those systems aren't discriminating against people. I'm not hearing a lot of conversation in this state about taking one or both of those models and passing laws here. Am I missing something, or is that true that just is not looming large in these AI task force conversations?
No, so the frontier model piece has not been an area that we have talked about. The subcommittees mainly are focused on discrete areas, like I mentioned, healthcare,
So
labor,
more sort of
employment,
a use
education.
case approach.
Right, yeah.
Like, what do we need to do to protect people in the healthcare sphere? What do we need to do to protect people? What was another example? Another sphere or realm?
Education.
Education.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
investment in education and
briefly, is there a reason why what Colorado did or what California's done or some other states isn't animating this task force? Do you have insight into that?
I don't have insight into that. The bill that created the AI task force did delineate specific areas that we were to focus on. And so that's how the task force has divvied up its work.
Organized itself, yeah.
Right. So it's been less focused on the Colorado Act as more of a comprehensive type of AI regulation, and that hasn't been the direction of the conversations. It's more discrete issues for discrete different realms.
Okay, we're going to shift gears. And Gretchen, let's kind of get back to that bigger picture. And if I were to tell sort of the story, the story of state government and technology procurement, sort of as I've seen it over the decades, reporting on and covering this town, I'd say it's a state agency has a problem. They've got an old system. They need to update it. There's nothing really built for state government that's off the shelf. So either you're going to buy something off the shelf and try to mold it to work for your need, or you're going to hire a company to build it from the ground up. invariably and inevitably, this is going to end up taking twice as long as we thought it was going to take and cost 3 times as much, or maybe take 3 times as long and cost twice as much, or whatever. Some of these projects are going to be abandoned, as we just saw happen with a $30 million, or actually a $292 million IT rebuild at the Department of Labor and Industries. Like, they spent nearly $300 million, and they've just decided to abandon ship or stop doing it. So how can we get out of that cycle? How could we start to do this in a way where things come in on time and on budget, or maybe sooner than we expected and under budget?
Wouldn't that be fabulous?
Yeah. And I know you weren't around for the L&I one, so I won't ask you to. I'm not going to ask you the hard questions about that. But that is the latest example of, like, you got to be. What happened here, right? That's not good for taxpayers. It's not good for customers, right?
One of the ways we're seeing contracts and procurement make a pivot right now is to better accommodate agile software development. So one of the
Okay, you got to define that for
yeah,
me.
yeah. So for the last 20 years or so, we've typically used a waterfall type methodology for software. We come in, we define all the requirements, right? And then we send this list of 1,400 requirements over to our engineers, and then they start building the system. And then when we get done with the system, we take it back to the users and we say,
How's it
ta-da,
working?
what do you
Yeah,
think, right? Yeah, not a great way, though, to really build software. When you're trying to do quick iterations, you're trying to use the users and your customers to demo very quickly, in typically 2-week sprints. And so you're developing software quickly for feedback and changing it and being able to change the priorities of the overall project team based on the executive sponsor and the product owner, where they need to go. State procurement and contracting has had a hard time purchasing agile because it's more of a unknown capacity over 2 weeks versus these are the specific fixed deliverables that you're going to do. So that tension has always been there, but I think we're getting better at helping procurement purchase agile software development programs. We're also doing better, like, challenges and unique types of procurement opportunities. I know WATEC did one like this recently, where we had a business problem to solve, and we invited several vendor partners to come in and tell us how they would solve it, and then selecting the successful one from that type of an arrangement. So there are things that we're doing that will make it easier for us to contract and procure and deliver on projects that look more agile and more modular, because we're not doing the 1,400 requirements. 3 years of development goes back to the users. Oh, that's not really what we had intended.
Yeah, so the sort of flip of that is, what would it look like?
From procurement?
Yeah, if you're not saying, here's the Cadillac machine we need, now go build it, and then come back in 3 years and, like, oh, you didn't build it right.
Yeah.
What would it look like if you were to reverse engineer this?
Yep, it can look a variety of different ways. You can outline a challenge that lays out the business problem you're trying to solve, and a variety of different use cases that you want that vendor to demonstrate to you. It can look like this is the kind of overall scope of what we need to accomplish, but the nuts and bolts of the requirements are not fleshed out. Because what happens, and I've seen this several times, is we define all the requirements of today's system with the thought of what is possible today, right? But we don't actually try to simplify, rationalize our processes, our products, our services, and instead of doing a true transformation where we're optimizing processes, streamlining operations, and really getting the value of a transformation, we're actually doing more of a lift and shift, and we're taking today's processes, today's overall activities, and we're replicating them in a brand new system, which has some value, but not nearly the value of true transformation.
Okay, I do want to just correct the record here. It looks like $30 million was spent on the L&I project, with $240 million left to spend and another 9 years. So they had spent money, but it was taking a really long time. So just to correct the record on that. I have, in talking to your predecessors and people in this space in the past, what I've been told is that a lot of the rules around procurement that are designed to prohibit corruption or single source contracts or somebody giving their best friend a contract, the stuff that's built into the procurement process to protect the taxpayers makes this really cumbersome. It advantages the big players, makes it harder for the littler ones to compete. You, just looking at the RFPs would make a lot of companies turn away and run fast. So are there ways, like how much flexibility do people in your role really have when there's so many rules about procurement in place?
There are other contracting paths as well. So this state and several other states will leverage cooperative contracts that provide for a little bit more flexibility with current solutions and not having to do a full competitive RFP. It's still a competitive solicitation process, but it's not a full-blown RFP can take 9 months to a year to go through the entire process. This allows us to quicken that, as well as to identify solutions that have been successful in the past and help kind of apply those same lessons to Washington.
How does this fit into the strategic plan that you are tasked with implementing?
Yeah. It's really about modern tools and technologies and modern processes to go along with them to enable us to do things faster, cheaper, easier.
And how possible is this? Just because you have to change culture, you have to change the way the agencies are coming at these projects, you have to obviously change the kind of, get people to look at contracting opportunities beyond what they're maybe used to. It seems like you're shifting an aircraft carrier.
Yeah. Well, part of, I think, the reason why we're doing this is to benefit the agencies that they don't have to do these negotiations themselves, right? As the central technology provider, we can negotiate those contracts on their behalf.
Do you have the capacity to do that?
We have the capacity, and keep me honest here, Katy, not to act as a contract holder, but to act as a service provider. So if we hold the contract and our state agencies are coming through to our service, then yes, in more of a broker deal.
What, go back to the budget, it's tight budget times. How does that affect the ability to modernize? And I think in the introduction I mentioned, I didn't name it, but there are I think DSHS still uses COBOL, which is, as I understand it, kind of 1950s era technology up through the 80s, and yet we still are relying on, and there's like a few people who still know how to actually go in and tinker with it, but
now we have mainframe as a service, so.
Okay. You offer that at WATEC, is that right?
We do,
Okay.
yes.
But when you look at it at an enterprise that is in some respects still operating in the 1950s, or at least the 1980s, and you're trying to bring them up to the 21st century.
Yeah, so what we need to do is look for those similarities in the tools that we already have invested in and tools and platforms that we can invest in that serve multiple functions. So like we have several agencies that have a law enforcement function, right? DNR, DFW, Washington State Patrol, lots of them. And so do they all need a records management system that looks different from each other? Maybe not. Maybe a platform type opportunity is better for them, where we build a data model around the use case and business function itself, and then we share that across multiple agencies. And that's what I think the platforms allow us to do today, that we have most of the platforms in our environment, and then we can offer to our agencies more low-code, no-code types of build that is going to be easier for us to maintain as long as we have the skill set, typically cheaper for us to build, and we can leverage that in multiple places.
Katy, what do you see as the opportunities, and as you hear this and you think about where the agency wants to go and kind of take the enterprise of state government, what are the privacy implications, or if that's not kind of where your mind goes, is there sort of a modernization or kind of a 5 to 10 year plan for privacy that is maybe parallel to this? But
well, privacy is where my mind goes. But where we're seeing a lot of the existing contracts that we have already are with some modern applications. But I know you maybe don't want to pivot back to AI, but where we're seeing AI getting introduced into tools that the agencies already use. So this is an area then where we are asking for additional review for security purposes and for privacy purposes. And so we do a privacy threshold analysis about the use of personal information in particular applications, whether it's an intentional use or an incidental use. And I say intentional meaning ones that we're procuring for that particular purpose, or incidental, where we're finding a lot of tools are just having AI added to it. And so for those reasons, for privacy reasons and other security and risk reasons, we're doing extra scrutiny of these new enhancements to ensure that the tools are still being used responsibly with the handling of the public's information.
This is a little bit off topic, but I do want to get the question in while I have you here, and that is, there's so much talk right now about the federal governments and other states that have different policies and perhaps different values than Washington State's elected majority, trying to leverage information and data to potentially go after Washingtonians. Mm-hmm. How is your office having to think about protecting data in the context of, say, reproductive rights, or the Trump administration seeking information about people's immigration status, for instance? And that might be information the state has and has collected for other reasons.
Yes, so we have taken the position, and we are working with state agencies to think about what data they're collecting and for what reason. Do they need to have that data, and who are they sharing it with, and who are they sharing it with in automatic ways versus are there ways to reevaluate how different data is being shared for what reason? So that's part of the conversation. The other side, where we are trying to ensure that our contracts with vendors, so Gretchen was mentioning, working with our new, developing new cloud services. We're talking with them about their data protection agreements and getting notice of any type of requests for data and being put on notice so that we can notify our attorneys at the AGO, Attorney General's office, to possibly go in and quash subpoenas and those types of things in order to protect the data that our state agencies are using.
What is the, again, it gets technical and we sort of get in the weeds, but let's step back and remind ourselves that this is ultimately about state government serving the 6-7 million people in this 7 million people in this state better, and creating a less friction. I think people even talk about sort of an Amazon experience, and if nothing else, what Amazon has sort of trained us all up for is that we want a frictionless experience. And it's very hard for state government or any kind of government to deliver that. So if that's ultimately the goal, and the governor has been talking a lot about wanting customers, or he put Jesse Jones in charge. And I know WATEC is working a little bit with Jesse Jones, and I guess it's now the Your Washington is the rebranded effort that he's working on to sort of work on customer experience. But help us bring this home, because it's the back end of trying to do better procurement, but what about the front end of what the customer is experiencing?
Yeah. I think what we're seeing, and we've seen it over the last few years, but we'll actually reap the benefits of it very soon here, is a pivot from an agency-focused perspective to a customer-focused perspective. And we've always designed our products and services as government around how we're organized, right? And how, okay, you go from this division to this division to this division, but then do you need to go to another agency? We have not made those handshakes frictionless because we haven't designed some of our products and services from how the customer
So
wants
if you
and needs to
needed a
receive
permit,
it.
for instance, and you need to interface with 2 or 3 different agencies, the way it normally works is go to agency A,
Exactly.
and then go to agency B, and then go to agency C.
And that should be all happening on the background, so customer does not need to know which department it goes to and how it's processed, and then it's served back up to the customer as the permit is complete.
So give us, though, I know if you could snap your fingers and make this happen, you would do it. But give us the reality check of, because I feel like each administration promises this, or at least something better. And as I mentioned, that kind of analogy of moving a aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Like, what are we 25 years out from this?
No,
this vision?
Katy's going to have wonderful comments to say on this too, but I'm so excited because of the customer experience executive order. For this makes it real. Every single agency has
And this is a Governor Ferguson order.
Yes, this is Governor Ferguson's executive order that all of the agencies need to focus on and improve our customer experience. So Jesse Jones, you mentioned your Washington is collecting data from all of our state agencies on what are their customer service metrics and how do they plan on improving their customer experience. So the time is right for us to actually understand where we are today, where we want to be, and then prioritize the initiatives that are going to get us there. So I don't think it's that far off. I think it's really going to happen, and it's going to take all the state agencies making it their personal mission, but then also coming together to make it our mission to share data across the state so we can provide that experience.
What would you say about this, Katy?
So the enhancement of what we're calling the digital experience program is a priority. And the great thing about the executive order as well is that it highlights the importance of sharing data responsibly and thinking about security and privacy in terms of how the data is going to, or how the agencies are going to more effectively and efficiently deliver services to customers. And so we are working with the agencies to build, and our team to build, we're improving wa.gov, which is the website where people go, and we're going to increase the capabilities of that website. That's on the roadmap, which hopefully is not going to be 25 years, hopefully within the next 4 years, to be able to be not quite maybe meeting Amazon standards, but being more personalized and accessible for individuals.
But the thinking here is that instead of going, in the future perhaps, instead of going to each, like if I need to go to help my kid get a driver's license, which I recently did, you go to the Department of Licensing sort of by default. In the future, you might go to wa.gov, and that's just like you go to, well, we won't advertise for that company again, but you go to a particular company, and that's the portal that opens it up the whole realm.
Exactly.
So instead of go agency by agency, you just go to wa.gov, and then what do you need? What do you want to do? Okay.
Yes, that is the vision, that it will be a service finder for the public.
Before we run out of time, I do want to ask Gretchen about this idea of shadow technologies. Is there this whole underworld of like stuff that's sitting on the the servers that's not supposed to be there? Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yes.
Sounds like, so what's that? What's that look like, and what are you doing are you going around yanking servers?
No, I think we have the server issue done, but that's been one of the really important parts about getting this foundation in place, is so that we don't create shadow IT. Comes about because the central IT organization is not meeting the business needs, right? Or the IT organization. So right now, we have put the foundation in place to be able to enable these tools with our state agencies and the employees so that we don't have shadow IT popping up all over the place.
How widespread is that?
Well, 2 months in, I'm not exactly certain, but my sense is that we do inventories on all of our applications, so we have 7,000 applications that we know of. My sense is our shadow IT is very, very small, personally.
I do want to ask you about this third-party contracting and where we've had breaches that Nevada, let's just, cybersecurity is a big issue. We've got a couple minutes left. The state of Nevada just had a huge hack that affected kind of its enterprise of state government. It was a ransomware situation. As I understand it, they didn't actually end up paying out, but the bad guys had been in there for months. So, and where I was going with this is that often where we've seen hacks at the state level here is through private vendors who are doing like phishing licenses, right? And that becomes kind of a way in. But let's stay with Nevada for a minute. What have you been monitoring this? What lessons are being learned? I would imagine a lot of states are like, well, I'm glad it wasn't us, but what can we learn?
Yeah, the CIO actually just released the after-action report, right? So I took a look at that. Several of us have. I think the lesson there is that we're always vulnerable. We're always vulnerable, and we're vulnerable for, smart, reasonable, rational people and all of our employees. We can fall for
Easily.
we can
And
fall
with
for these
AI,
things
it's
easily.
getting harder to detect.
Yes, yes, and new
the
ones
phishing.
all the time, right? So we all have to be vigilant. Cybersecurity is a team sport, and we've all got to be really paying attention.
And how do you know if somebody's gotten in and not find out in 3 months?
Exactly.
I mean, that's pretty scary. Just a final word. I'll give you the last word, Katie, as you think about where you want to go from here. Very briefly.
Oh, with privacy?
Yeah, just with privacy, yeah.
So we look forward to, I'm working with Gretchen, our new Chief Technology Officer, and so between the two of us, and then working with our Chief Information Security Officer, across the WATEC team, and working on enterprise services for the public and for working with agencies, I want to say that we're really digging in on responsible AI use and responsible use of personal information.
Got it. I appreciate you both coming in. Katy Ruckle, Chief Privacy Officer for the state. Gretchen Peri, new Chief Technology Officer. Thank you again. It was brave of you to come in 2 months into the job, Gretchen. We appreciate it. Thanks to both of you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Inside Olympia. We'll see you again next week.